Hello everybody, Raspberry Barrel here, back at it again to read part 2 of the Mewni historian biography of Selene, the Expander. Before we begin, make sure that if you haven't seen part 1, you go check that out. And I also just want to say thank you all for all the subscribers. We're getting really close to that big subscriber goal, and I'm really excited for that. So just thank you all for your subscriptions and your support, and I hope you guys are enjoying all the videos and are excited for what's to come. And without further ado, let's just begin. Please forgive me if I stutter, hesitate, or mispronounce anything, and for any noises in the background. Let's go! In Splenix of 961 BS, Selene had developed her own inner magic as her wings had grown out. Her mother decided to send her to Zim Sorcery Academy in Alvae, a place for her to develop her own personal magic in an environment full of peers. By summer's start, Selene left home and moved into the academy, a large building close to Dragonfly Tower, which was quite large and had a few smaller towers surrounding the larger one. There were only about a dozen or so Mew women and only a couple of Mew men with magic. One of them was her cousin Azulon, though boys and girls slept in different dorms. But being so close to Azulon did not hinder her repressed feelings for Azulon. This academy had only been open for a couple of years and was very small, but would grow to be the most prestigious magic academy in all of Mewni. Selene would learn to draw out her own magic without the wand, which was very hard even for her. It took months for her and the other students to learn how to draw out their magic, on purpose at least. It's common knowledge that post-puberty, girls and boys whose wings started growing can have magic fluxes, but it takes training to control and harness these. A moment that invokes strong positive emotions to channel the magic, and when Selene manifested her energy ball, first, the others asked what she was thinking of, and she replied it was of someone that she had a crush on. In her second year at the academy, Selene and her new school of friends had learned to draw out their own magic and began working on their spell casting. Selene also learned to cast her elemental dances by substituting her wand with one finger and taught this technique to her fellow students, who would learn to create their variations of the dances. Selene greatly enjoyed her time at the academy and made some new friends who weren't royals or staff, but she found it incredibly difficult to resist her feeling for Azulon. However, a few weeks after Selene turned 20 in 959 BS, one of her roommates, Marcella, returned to their dorm early and found Selene with her dress halfway down and on the top of none other than Azulon, interrupting a pretty serious kiss session. While Marcella didn't tell anyone, she was red-faced for the entirety of the next day, along with Selene and Azulon. The two would continue to keep their relationship secret for over a year, making the most out of the little moments they had alone together. That summer, Selene would return home, but kept in contact with her former classmates, feeling that she would be needing their skills for the future plans, which would be sooner than she thought, as her mother announced the next year her daughter would become queen. Selene was so excited about finally being able to enact her plans, but her 2 years away caused her to make some adjustments, which the next year gave her plenty of time to do. In Grievance of 958 BS, 2 weeks before her coronation, Selene couldn't contain the secret of her relationship with Azulon. Her entire family was shocked beyond belief, but rather than they being yelled at, her mother and Zim argued like never before. 1 or 2 towers had to be rebuilt, but the parents somewhat accepted it. While it was just a known thing that relations between kin would result in problems with children, Selene and Azulon were cousins, so not so closely related, and on top of that, their parents were half-siblings. While there were those who tried to split up Selene and Azulon, introducing them to eligible people as the coronation grew closer, but Selene and Azulon were determined. On Grievance 41st, Selene donned her dark-colored dress and walked down the halls of the castle in her new bun and pigtail style, a style which she would grow to wear in her everyday, and walked into the grand hall where her princess crown was removed and her custom queen crown was placed on her head. From then on, Selene would be the queen. After quite a festive night celebrating the butterfly coronation, and that was the night Selene asked Azulon to be her king, her partner, and Azulon said yes. Selene's status as queen allowed her to build the ships she designed, checking on the progress herself, though she was constantly asked why she was having these large ships constructed, but she claimed it would be well worth the wait. Mage Party. In the spring next year, 957 BS, when the flowers were in bloom on Grevnock 46, right after Selene and Azulon turned 22, they married. By marrying into the butterfly family, Azulon's younger brother, Brullo, would be the next dragonfly king. The day after Selene announced her grand plans for exploration into the ocean they came from, to find new lands for future generations. For the next 2 months, Selene began looking for volunteers to go on the voyage with her. She had a total of 6 large ships constructed, each capable of holding dozens of people, along with their supplies, to last them for a few Selenes. Aside from crew mothers, were also passengers, as well as workers, as Selene's intentions was to colonize, plus some general people who wanted to see a new land. Selene would be accompanied by her husband, their cousin Scarlet Firefly, and her husband, Freyson Johansson, her father Red, and Selene's younger brother Corvus, along with Brisa Phoenix. On Cork 20th that year, the summer solstice, Selene and her ship set sail on their historic voyage. They left on Settler Shore, where almost 100 years ago their history began, and Selene and all of the other voyagers waved goodbye to their loved ones. Selene and Corvus were a little sad their sister Hecate didn't want to accompany them, but she did take notice of the large blush on his face when he saw Brisa was accompanying them. To say the trip was boring wouldn't be totally inaccurate. They did have ways of entertaining themselves, mainly stories and songs, but about once Selene into the journey, Corvus got his wings, which wasn't expected. Her brother took after their father in many ways. In his teens he'd grown a lot and developed some good build. Perfect for a warrior type, but Corvus also became a rather good mage, picking up almost as quickly as Selene did back at the academy. Conditions aboard the ships weren't the same as life in a castle that Selene was used to. While she and Azulon did have their private quarters, there was still no privacy aboard the ship, which made some activities difficult, but Selene had faith that they would find new land, and she did like the beards her husband and brother were acquiring on this long journey, and she noticed Brisa liked the one Corvus was growing, and Selene insisted he act upon the feeling he obviously shared. After nearly 4 Selenes of travel, many of the ship's passengers were getting restless, and some asked Selene to turn around. While she didn't want to think about going back, there was a problem that would require them to go back soon. They were starting to run low on food and drinking water, and while they had discovered 2 islands, both completely unsuitable for settlement, and the captains had been charting their journey and estimated if they turned back they could be back in the halfway point between the 2 islands in a Selene, and be back home in a little over 4 Selene. Selene considered going home, as they would soon only had the resources for return, but on Darturk 40th, a terrible storm drove them off course. It was worse than anything they had faced before. Massive waves and thunder combined with heavy rainfall forced everyone below deck, but Selene could see the other ships were in just as much trouble as hers, and she would not let her people sink. She summoned her wings and flew onto the deck and into the storm. Selene took out her wand and dipped deep down inside, and for the first time summoned her butterfly form. Her short skirt, pants, and shirt merged and turned into a black dress with puffy sleeves, and was barefoot, She gained 4 more arms, and her skin turned a deep red, and antennae with silver moons at the ends. Using her powerful magic, created a large red bubble that surrounded the 6 ships, including underneath. This protected them from the storm and raging seas. But Selene couldn't keep up the barrier alone, but her husband and brother flew out next to her, the latter having only basic training but still managed to help keep the barrier. Seeing this, the other mages, many are Selene and Azulon's old academy mates, flew out to the edge of the barrier and offered their own magic to keep the barrier up. With almost 24 mages at work, this put less strain on each mage's magic, which allowed them to keep it up throughout the terrible storm. The storm of 957 BS. When the storm dissipated the next morning, on Darturk 41st, Selene and her other mages returned to their ships exhausted, but nobody was seriously injured thanks to them. Selene and Azulon were resting in their private cabin when they heard the ringing of the bell. The bell signaled land. The two ran out and saw a huge mass of land in the horizon, and they were too far away from the 2 priorly discovered islands for the storm to have blown them close to either one. When they got closer and some of her strength was back, she summoned her wings and flew towards the land with Azulon next to her, and from another ship she saw Scarlet and Corvus flying as well. Selene was the first one to land on the beach, Azulon and Scarlet being the second and third, and Corvus crashed, landing on the beach as the 4th. Scarlet chuckled, saying it was one of the better landings from beginning flyers she'd seen, given that Corvus's wings were still pretty new to him. Selene and her family traveled uphill to see a vast amount of land, and this land felt different. The first island they found was forbidden to even be traveled to, and the second was full of flying snakes that greeted them as soon as they arrived. But this land, whether an island or continent, was different. She could feel it as the winds blew throughout her pigtails. This land would be the site of the next Mewni colony. A tear of happiness fell. Selene pulled in Azulon for a deep and passionate kiss. The 6 ships pulled up on shore by dusk, and the next morning the crew and passengers vacated to explore the new lands. Selene had Azulon use a special fire he invented for instant messaging to inform her mother and the others that they had found new land, perfect for colonization. Many of the surrounding trees were cut and used not only for the beginning of constructing houses, but also the smoke of the ships helped clear the stench that was acquired. Selene had 2 ships return to Butterfly to bring back supplies, along with the other ships that were being constructed when they left. It was estimated that a straight course would take little over 2 Selenes to get home, then another 2 to get back. By then they should have a pretty decent settlement going. The 4 remaining ships would stay behind to provide shelter until the houses were properly finished. Her cousin Scarlet, her father Red, and her husband Freyson would lead parties to help map their new lands. Her brother Corvus was a delegator, helping to divide the tasks in the growing settlement, and Selene and Azulon would plan out the colony, as well as help speed the process along with the other mages to build the homes faster and help grow food, just like her grandmother before her. And Selene made it clear that when they finished the settlement here, their work was far from over. As the weeks passed, much progress was made on the settlement, so much so that they could afford to slow down when the weather cooled. Though it cooled later and began to snow once the year changed, back home snow would fall in the last couple of weeks of the year, and the warmer weather returning sooner allowed them to finish their settlement before spring. As Selene predicted in Sagnog of that year, 956 BS, a fully developed city was built near the shore of the land they landed on. On Sagnog 13th, she saw 7 ships in the horizon. 2 were the ships she sent back. 1 was built before she left, but left behind, and the remaining 4 were constructed afterwards. Most aboard were workers who came to help with the colony. Some were people who came to permanently live there, A couple were pregnant and ready to give birth. Selene was ecstatic with the progress, but wanted to venture further inland, to establish capital deep inland and build out around. And in spring, her cousin Scarlet returned with news of a large flat land, perfect for developing a large city, like Arcadia back home. Soon their settlement, named, was completed, the first city in the new land, but it was only one of many. Soon, Selene and the others set out to build a capital for the lands they were colonizing. The land would be known as Lucialis, meaning new light in the first Mewni. Selene's people watching in Solaris. And P.S. I really like this picture. Selene and the others spent weeks making small villages with only a dozen or so houses on their way to begin work to the new capital. That way, the travelers could have proper resting places and would begin the expansion in further generations to come. Things went smoothly, even in Quark of 956 BS. On their journey, Selene and the others encountered monsters. While most ran away on sight, Selene took note of their appearances and noticed how different they were from the monsters back home. Back home, she learned about kappas, slime creatures, frogmen, and conjoinicans. But here they were creatures that were like half human, half animal. These creatures were later named satyrs, minotaurs, porcoluses, and others. These monsters were fascinating to her, and she studied them. Selene took notes of their appearances and could have recalled she'd read about them before. That's when she remembered something in the spell book from her mother's chapter. Her mother fought firsthand in the Second Monster War, and had noted that during it, monsters appeared that hadn't been seen before. She read the description of some of these monsters and realized they were the same ones she herself encountered. What her mother and uncle did during the war not only shook the monsters back home, but in these lands too. But as fall came and the crops they'd planted in spring began ripe for harvest, which is far better tasting than food grown magically, Selene began to think about home. The colonists who came to Lucialis were preparing to start over for a new life, but Selene wanted to go back home, just for a little while. When discussing these feelings with the Zulon, she didn't think things would slow down, too much at least, if she left for a few months. But Selene, her husband, and brother went on a ship home on the 1st of Torax in 955 BS. The trip home was a lot smoother than her Selene journey to discover Lucialis, as there weren't as many people in the ship, and it would be much sooner. She returned home on Sagnog 18th, and when she arrived at the castle, the entire city rejoiced to have their queen home again after 2 years. She was greeted by her parents, who couldn't believe how much they had accomplished, nor recognized Corvus at first with his massive beard. Selene was eager to see her sister again, but her parents informed her that she left to do some traveling on her own. Selene was very sad that she was gone, but she perked right back when her parents asked to hear all about the travels. Selene had journals full of notes and drawings, not just of the monsters, but the animals, plants, and landscapes. These journals were kept in the Alexandra Library, but sadly time would ravage these books before the castle fire of 3 BS. But there have been many copies made throughout the centuries. Selene and Corvus told their parents all about their journey into the new lands, but saw a look of worry on her mother's face when she said her and Corvus were returning to their colony. She assured her mother that when the time came to raise a family, she would do it here in Butterfly. But Selene was still years away from thinking of starting a family, as she was only turning 24. That night, Selene slept in her own bed for the first time in 2 years, and it felt different compared to the ones she'd been sleeping in. Selene spent the next 2 months at home, resting and also resuming her queen responsibilities to her kingdom. With the plans she was developing to put the colony under the Firefly family's rule, this meant her kingdom would gain the lands around Lumenia, which was next to Arcadia, which was also part of the Butterfly Kingdom, meaning her kingdom was growing. With this massive amount of territory, it would be hard to rule over all of them. But then she remembered her brother Corvus. She remembered how he was such a natural leader, and this led to the creation of nobility. Like her grandmother before her created the 10 kingdoms to better rule the humans. But as the kingdoms would grow, they would need people to help them, managing the masses. Thus, the ideas of noble families were born. These actions would help make Selene one of the most significant queens in history. Selene and Corvus, nervous to see their parents. And that's the end of Selene the Expander, Biography Part 2. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and once again, thank you to Mewni Historian for allowing us to read this. Please, everyone, go check out Mewni Historian on DeviantArt. Once again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video, coming soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye!